Hello everybody, this is Mark with Pelican Wooden Things. Today we're going to make an interesting acrylic project. Not too long ago, both my wife and I received floral bouquets. Since we have cats, we cannot keep them in the house, so the natural place was the garage, where I hung them upside down to dry them out. Now we can take them inside once we're all done with this and enjoy the beauty of the flowers after the project is done without endangering our key cats. So I chopped up all the petals mainly and some of the fancier looking accent bits, I guess call it. I don't know what the florist would call it, but the little fern-like things. Give it a good mix. Now my plan is to make a lidded vessel, and so it's got to be fairly tall. That's why I put it in the taller of the two. The other one just has whatever's left over, and I'll figure out a project for those another time when I get some more resin. Basically, I used up the very last of my resin on this particular project, and I'll have to order some more. Just to give it a little color in between the petals, I put in a little dash of blue mica powder. And I put the flowers in, and to try to prevent as many bubbles as possible, I would douse them in there and try to squish them around a bit just to let the flowers get completely covered. Hopefully no bubbles. And of course, I'm going to put it in a pressure pot. That helps a lot. Open it up a couple of days later. I'm going to cut off the uneven top part with the bandsaw. Never try to cut something round on the bandsaw without some kind of support. It'll roll right out of your control. And this little jig here took me, I think, 5-10 minutes to make. I just took some scrap pieces from the bin and glued and screwed it together. When we start out, we make tenons for both ends. I want to put a worm screw in this one because I'm going to use both ends. So we'll use the coal jaws there. First I'm flattening off the top. Didn't cut it quite straight on the bandsaw, but not bad. And of course, coal jaws aren't meant to hold the mass that this is right now, so it flew off on me. Took me a minute to find it too. Mark off my tenon, and I'll work my way down there a little bit at a time with a nice square profile carbide tool. I'm using carbide tools today. I find they work a little better with the resin, with real hardwoods and stuff like that. Usually I prefer traditional tools, but sometimes carbide tool is just what the doctor ordered. Get a decent sized tenon on there. Looks good. Take the coal jaws off, put the regular chuck in, and flip this thing around to make a tenon on the other end. Make sure everything's good and tight. And we'll more or less repeat the procedure I did with the other end. Now you notice the live center closest to you is not really turning, and you got to keep your eye on things like that. That means it's not really putting pressure or support for your project at this point. tightened it up a bit, and we're back in business. One of the less attractive aspects of working with resin are these long strands that seem to get everywhere, and as they come off they seem to pick up static electricity, so they cling to everything. But the results are worth it, so we soldier on. At this point, it's important to decide which is the top and which is the bottom that you're going to be shaping. I kind of like to do the bottom towards the camera, towards the livestock when I start out. I don't always do, but I try to do it that way. You make a more shallow curve on the bottom as it's taller, and a sharper curve on the top. I just work at it till I get a pleasing shape. Try to make it as smooth as possible. Resin does tend to get little chips in it if you try to go too hard on it. You got to do some final cuts that are lighter to get rid of those chips. Now, one thing about working with resin, it's all about the sanding, it's all about the polishing. It's 80% of the project I'm sanding and or polishing to get that smooth glass-like appearance that you can see through. Consequently, in this video, there's going to be lots and lots of sanding and polishing. I tried to fast forward through a vast majority of it, skipped a lot of it altogether, but hopefully I included enough for you to get an idea of what the process is without overwhelming it. Put a little ridge there, and the top will fit over that ridge. Make a nice steady place for the top to rest when the project is completed. Pardon my big fat head, but of course I have to see what I'm doing as well. And as I sometimes do around this point in the process, I might reverse the lathe and work on the other side, so it makes it a little easier to see for both of us. Now, I want the project reasonably thin, but not so thin that I lose all the space for the flowers inside the resin to exist. If you cut it down to 1/8 of an inch, you won't be able to see any flowers in there because most of them will be cut away. So I'm going to clean up the rim here. Chamfer the edges a bit so they're not so sharp. So I hear chamfers separate us from the animals from another channel I watch. And here's some of that lovely sanding I've been telling you about. Now this is probably the best and only chance I'm going to have of cleaning up the inside of the bowl. After I take it off from here, my next step would be to remove the tenon off the bottom, and I won't have that opportunity to work the inside of the bowl again. So we'll try to get it all polished up while it's in this configuration. Applying a little abrasive paste. No point in working on the outside of the bowl yet. That's got a little final shaping yet to do after I finish the lid. But we'll try to get the inside all polished as much as we can. Now I also like to use these. This is a car polish, and I have 3 different grades of that, from coarse to super fine. No, 4 different grades, pardon me. And you see it does a pretty good job. Can't quite see through it yet as the outside is still cloudy. Now I've flipped it around, and this is the lid section, and I'm going to have to work to make the outer portion of that ridge that I made for the bottom section. Remember, when you're doing this, that whatever you cut off is doubled. If you remove a 1/16 of an inch on your side, it's a total of a 32nd of an inch. No, excuse me, 1/16 would be an eighth. My mistake, excuse me. I mean, of course, if you remove an eighth, you'd be removing a 1/4 of an inch, and so on and so forth. So you have to take it real slow till you get a nice tight fit for the lid. Okay, we'll proceed to hollow out the lid a bit, try to make an attractive surface on the inside. And of course, once we get that, oh, see some of that chip out there I was talking about. So we'll try to take some very light passes and get rid of all that. There you go. And of course, back to sanding, polishing, polishing, sanding, polishing, and so on and so on and so on. A little wet sanding too, sometimes that's helpful. At least it preserves your sandpaper somewhat. You don't go through sandpaper quite so quickly as the water washes the removed materials from the grit of the sandpaper. Abrasive paste, polish, and so on, so on, so forth. So now, as you see, it's a nice snug fit with the bottom of the vessel. After you cut it into pieces and hollowed it out and stuff, there's a little ridge between the two that you have to get rid of, which is why there's always a little final shaping after you put the box back together. And of course, sanding. Pardon me if I skip over a bit of that. Trust me, I sanded a good long time. Next job is to remove that little tenon off the bottom. Put the paper towel in there. It actually tightens the fit even more so than it is on its own, so it's a much better chance of staying put. I'm going to take very light cuts and not be aggressive in my sanding, but the paper towel should hold it there if it's tight enough to begin with, and as you see, it did just fine. Now we'll finalize the shape for the lid. First, remove the tenon and give it its final shape. Cold jaws may not be the most rigid holding system ever invented, but they sure have their uses, and this is definitely one of them. This lid masses much less than the entire blank did when it fell off earlier, and so there's much less chance of it coming off than there was of the whole massive blank. It'll hold the lid pretty well by itself. Let's put a little 3/8 inch hole in this. I'm not going to go all the way through, just enough to mount the finial to when I've got that made. Speaking of which, is a piece of canary wood left over from a nightstand I made, Lord, back in the 90s. Yay, I finally get to use some traditional tools. Quite fond of my skew chisel. It leaves such a smooth surface. I'm marking out the locations of the various elements. It's a two-part top with, at the bottom right there where I'm cutting now, is going to be the part that goes into the hole we put into the top. I'll shape the two sections of the top and the bottom. I'm just going to do about approximately 3/8 of an inch to fit into the lid.
Sunrise is just for you, so come along and take my hand.
As you can see, canary wood has some lovely colors to it. Now separate that off. I'm going to take it over to the disc sander and get rid of that little nub on the end. Of course, you didn't think you'd get away without more sanding, did you? Of course, you kind of have to. The disc sander's got like 80 grit on it and leaves quite a few scratches, deep scratches. And in such a tiny thing as that, deep scratches would not be great. Okay, some extra thick super glue to glue it in. Too much. Wipe it up. I did learn one thing: in limited quantities, you can use acetone on acrylic resin. It won't damage it. I wouldn't soak it or anything like that, but just to wipe off a little excess super glue works fine. And there we go. Look at that. Very nice. As a last step, you thought we were all done with sanding and polishing. I'm afraid not. I'm going to buff it on my buffing system thing here. We use 3 different types of buff. It's Tripoli, then white diamond, and then finally a hard carnauba wax. There's the white diamond. And finally the carnauba wax. We'll be buffing them inside and out. Same basic process, just a different shape of buff pad. And there we are. There's the final product. Came out very nice, I believe. I like it a lot. Lovely gift for the lovely lady in my life. So, thank you folks for watching. I hope you enjoyed watching me create this little box. I appreciate y'all watching. I hope you have a great day. Thanks.